Hello everyone and welcome to Pop Screen, part of the Geek Show podcast network. We are that corner of the Geek Show that likes to cover the good, the bad and the befuddling of movies either starring, by or about pop stars. No, the podcast covers a broad range of musical and cinematic genres, from country and western to hip-hop, from documentaries to science fiction. I'm your host, Graham Williamson. I'm a video artist and filmmaker who regularly writes for the Geek Show, and I'm joined this week by...
David!
Hello there, David. Where can people find you?
Hello. Well, people can find me at DavidPatrick81 on Instagram and pretty much everywhere else. And I also write for the Geek Show when I'm lucky enough to do so.
Indeed, yes. Now, for this, I feel like I have to ask a question first. And that question is not the usual, how familiar are you with the music artists in this film or anything like that. David, what is a good film?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
I'm going to counter it with another question, which is, how on earth do some films get made?
Yeah, well, someone should start a podcast about that, right?
That's a great idea. I hope they don't steal the title. Yeah, what is a film? I think that it takes more than just actors standing in front of a camera, and certainly the film we have today does a lot more than just actors standing in front of a camera. So I'm going to say it's a good film.
I was thinking this because the film we are about to discuss, which is Sextette by Ken Hughes, is by any sensible standards dreadful. It has there is at least one musical number which is, I think, the worst musical number I've ever seen, and I do this podcast. And
I can't hear which one.
there is some competition, I agree.
Yeah, I think it's been largely relegated to history, right? I certainly was not aware of it until a very dark night, late, lost on YouTube, and came across it.
When you say dark, in which sense?
In all senses. In all senses. Very late, lots of wine, and unable to sleep, room potentially spinning. And, up comes Sextette. It comes to you when you need it most. And then it never leaves. Actually, it's a weird story. I was looking up wedding music when I found this film. I actually, this says a lot more about me than anybody else, but I actually walked back down the aisle to Love Will Keep Us Together by Captain Tennille. It's like, I don't know, I was very young and probably drunk at the time when I decided that. So I actually walked down the aisle to that. So Googling that for different versions, just in case, I don't know why, because Captain Tennille's classic. I came across, well, I think it's probably the most famous song, at least according to YouTube, versions of it, and also the fact that it says Timothy Dalton. I know we're jumping, but yeah, Love Will Keep Us Together, and that's how I thought. And then I thought, this can't be real. Like, this is some kind of. I thought as AI, he created this in a way, but no, it's real, and it is the tip of an iceberg, a huge iceberg.
Yeah, an iceberg big enough to sink the Titanic all over again here, I think. Because Sextette is the last film starring Mae West. I nearly said by Mae West. In many ways it is. Mae West was famously a playwright as well as an actor. She wrote a lot of her vehicles. In this one, she and the director Ken Hughes apparently heavily rewrote the script because they were convinced that the original draft wasn't good enough, which just imagine what it replaced.
Again, where is that script? It's got to be somewhere. It's printed out. It was the 70s. Yeah, it must be pretty bad. It must be pretty bad.
But how would you... What do you think's the main thing that makes this film bizarre? What would you start with if you were trying to pitch this to people to watch?
I mean, to watch, again, that's a toughie because I think you have to be in a certain sensibility. And I mean, you know, there's a reason the word camp exists. And we talked about camp before on this podcast.
We certainly have.
Yeah, it's just, so again, speaks volumes about me and the films I'm watching. But, you know, it's almost so camp that it goes on to something else. And I think that you have to appreciate that sort of look. I think this film was even too much for like John Waters likes this film. Do you know what I mean? And it's like I think that he probably it's even a bit much for him because what they're trying to do and what they're trying to get away with and the whole premise of the film is so outrageous. But they know it's outrageous. And the fact that an 84-year-old woman is parading around, she's 84. You know, on paper, she's 28. You know, I mean, that's where we start.
Yeah.
And then nobody refers to her age. And look, she's walking.
Yeah.
What more do we want her to do? You know, she's moving her mouth. We'll talk, I'm sure, in a bit about some of the ways in which she got through the film. I heard some strange stories, but yeah, I mean, I think the premise. So, you know, how I would pitch it to somebody, if you wanted to see. I mean, talk about the height of camp. What's over that hill?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, and you know what? It's 125 minutes. It's not boring. At no point are you kind of going. I mean, a lot of points are you going, what the hell is this? But I don't. That feeling rides on through, and I was never bored, and I didn't want to switch it off. And like I said, it was maybe 3 a.m. when I watched it, and I didn't go to sleep until it was done. It kept me entertained. It's very bright, very colorful.
I have to say the version I watched was about an hour and 28. So.
Oh right, okay. Maybe you got the extended version.
Well, I was going to say, has time reversed while you were watching it or something? Because it can feel a bit like that.
Possibly. I mean, it is an odd duck, and it came around at a time where lots of films were odd ducks. I think.
Yeah.
And it's sort of. I think that's the only reason that it ever made it to screen. But I don't know. I think we've been sleeping on it. I think. I'm not going to say it's due a comeback, but I think it deserves a place. And we'll talk about it in a little bit. I've seen especially some pretty high profile people in the drag community are really citing.
Oh God, I'll bet. Yeah.
As inspiration, and I think that I'm surprised that we don't see it more resurrected, a bit more like some of the other kind of RuPaul-esque kind of tropes that you see, because I think it deserves it. I really do.
Well, I mean, you mentioned there what I think is the point that it's most infamous for, which is that Mae West is doing a sex farce where she has to cheat on her sixth husband on their wedding night to save the free world. As one does. Yeah. Understandable.
Don't go looking too deep into the plot here, Graham, because I think you're going to find yourself up to your neck in it quite quickly. That is it. I mean, she is the world's most famous actress, also the world's most famous, sexual partner.
Lover.
Lover. Yeah.
Yeah.
Author. Sort of like a spy or something. I mean, there's elements where it's like she's, I feel like she brokers world peace at the end.
Essentially, yeah.
Right. And so I'm saying this earlier. I wanted to keep this in my pocket till later, but I really think that she basically is a Austin Powers for the sort of geriatric female version of Austin Powers.
I will go with that. Yeah.
That's what I did in the last time I watched it. That's the impression I got. I was like, hold on. everything she says. He's got all the groovy baby and all that. She's got every sexual entendre under the sun, and some really good ones as well. How they came up with them, sometimes it was just like, this is nuts. But yeah, so I that's the way I like to think of her. And I think that framed like that, it sort of makes sense. It's just a shame that that's not how they necessarily saw it. I don't think they were being serious, but I think that's not necessarily how they saw it.
Oh yeah, I think. But what the problem is that the sensibility of it is kind of off. In that, I think nowadays you could absolutely make a sex comedy about elderly people. You could absolutely do that. Get Jane Fonda, get June Squibb. Knock yourself out. I don't care. That could well be good. But to do that, you have to acknowledge that these people are older than the people you normally see in sex comedies. You have to acknowledge that. And Sextette takes the exact opposite approach. Sextette is like, you see this 84-year-old Mae West in front of you here? Well, you don't. You're lying to yourself. This is Mae West as she was back in the 1930s.
Yeah.
And if you think any different, you're wrong. We're just not going to deal with that at all.
Exactly. And, it's not unusual that all these men are incredibly sexually attracted to her.
Yeah.
She doesn't have to move very much in order for them to be completely
overcome. Good job.
But they're overcome. I mean, the Russian ambassador is holding up world peace talks in order to sleep with her for one last time. I mean, she holds the fate of the world in her hands. And everybody knows who she is. She could potentially have sex with an entire American Olympic sports team if she wanted to.
Yes.
And, ironically, she barely sort of touches anyone at any time, but she could. That's female empowerment as far as I'm concerned. But I think you're right. I think, programs like the Golden Girls, talked a lot. They were older women, 10 or so years later, older women who talked about sex a lot and weren't shy about their sexuality, but the joke sometimes was that they were older, and so they played up to that, and they could talk about that. That was something which, absolutely. Now with programs like Grace and Frankie, and actually, Lily Tomlin is 84 now, so there you go.
Yeah.
There's someone of a similar age, and she would joke about sex and all that kind of stuff. But to put yourself out there as the main character in this film, and as such a sexual mystery. And being is just so. I mean, it's on one hand, it's really brave. On the other hand, it's just quite bizarre.
I think when I started getting into movies, and when I started getting into bad movies, this was often cited as one of the all-time Hollywood bombs, and a lot of the criticism of it was just purely ageist. Or Mae West's so old and she looks terrible, and it's like. Now I think you can see a bit of the nobility of the thinking behind it, while also acknowledging that it goes about as badly wrong as it possibly could.
She was known throughout her life. My God, reading back on some of the things she did, it's nuts.
Yeah.
She went to jail for writing a play called Sex.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? It's and went to jail because it was so risque, and I can imagine it wasn't that bad by today's standards. But, I think it's not strange that she wanted to do, that she wrote this already. I don't think that's odd. But to put herself forward for it, I can see how, 10 years ago or so, the joke would have been her, and isn't she horrendous? But honestly, I having only watched it the first time about 5 years ago, then watched it a couple of times since, there's a real sort of good, she's game for it. She could, not she does a good job is a different matter. She's put herself forward. She wrote it, and she's starring in it, and she wrote it as a vehicle for herself, obviously. And if it's going on the screen, she's going to be in it. And there's a respect. I respect her slightly for that.
I think it is one of those things where it depends entirely on how you're viewed at the moment, doesn't it? It's like when Mae West was in her heyday the fact that she wrote and starred in her own vehicles was
Yeah.
really impressive. You know, it
Yeah.
marked her out as a multi-hyphenate, as someone who took care about, you know, the quality of the film she stars in.
Mhm.
And I think with Sextette, you can look at it sympathetically, but you can also very easily understand why everyone looked at this and thought, right, vanity project.
Oh, sure. And it is.
Yeah.
And, you know, she is in beautiful gowns the whole time. And
Edith Head gowns.
sorry?
Edith Head designed the costume.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Who was her old collaborator in like the 30s or something, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's nuts, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, you know, I know, and why again, it makes me respect her more because she just was like, look, I'm going to be, I am 84. The work potentially from Hollywood is dried up.
Yeah.
I'm going to get these things going. We're going to get myself. Obviously, she had people with her as well who were helping, and you know, the director was well known as well. So it's like, you know, people. She obviously knew people in Hollywood to help her get these things done. But you know, she got her old crew around her, and you know, gave jobs to older people, and yeah, unusual for the time. You know, I'm sure when it was not, you know, older people, I'm sure were just not getting. I mean, the difference would be: does she want to finish off her film career and life in a sex romp? Or is she going to play some sort of old grandmother who gets, you know, beaten on the head with it by a troglodyte person
Yes.
in some kind of awful B movie, you know, which a lot of them did as well, and you know they didn't get any more respect for that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I mean,
Very
if you're
true.
going to go out, you're going to go out with a bang. That's how this is how you go out with a bang. To me, it's sad. You know, speaking about it now, it's quite sad that it's been forgotten a little bit in the annals of bad movies, and you know. I feel like, yeah, like I said earlier, I think it deserves a little place in the hearts of the camp community.
Well, I think part of the reason why it's vanished is because the context in which it was a laughing stock originally sort of doesn't exist now, which is that in the past, people could not believe that Mae West was still doing her Mae West act at the age of 84.
Yeah,
And nowadays, it is a bit like, well, who's Mae West? What's her act? You
yeah,
know?
yeah. You're right. I mean, it's funny how some of her catchphrases live on more than she does.
Mm,
You know, come up and see me sometime, all that kind of stuff. You know, that was all her, and
yeah.
probably many times written by her. You know, so she came up with it. But and I guess the sort of concept of her lives on. But certainly, I think her individual films or you know her plays are you know quite of the past.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this film is very much a film of its time.
Yes, I think when I was sort of watching it, I think one of the big boundaries towards trying to reclaim it now, whether as a camp thing or as a sort of forerunner of the kind of roles for older stars that we get now, I think a big problem a young audience might have for it is that it is just entirely innuendo based in a way that comedy just is not anymore. It
Yeah,
reminded me a lot of Fern Brady in her recent autobiography,
right.
declared innuendo to be the most English of all comedy styles, and she did not mean that as a compliment.
Okay. See, I love that. I mean, that's sort of
Mm,
that's. I mean, and you're absolutely right. You don't really see that kind of humor, mainstream or otherwise now. Do you know what I mean? There
no,
are, you know, whereas I think innuendo is much more, much that sort of bawdy, rompy, Confessions of a Window Cleaner, sex kind of, you know, carry on.
yeah,
You know, was very of it. You know, that was very de rigueur. You know, in this sort of what are we saying, late in 60s, 70s. You know, and this is an onslaught. This is an onslaught of innuendo. It never stops. I mean, every other word out of her mouth is a innuendo. I mean, one of my favorites, and I was gonna make a list, but literally, there's just too many. And you know,
it's
out of
just the
context,
script.
it's just a script exactly, and out of context, they don't work. You know, because it's always in reference to something or somebody, or you know, let's just say, you know, the English are coming at one point was a you know, Timothy Dalton standing there. It's just too much. But one of my favorites, and a lot of them are just sort of her just like standing very still, and you know, just saying something that to end the scene or begin a.
Yeah,
So one of my favorites was, "I'm the girl who works at Paramount by day and Fox by night," which I just thought like,
yes. Which I must say, I was less keen on the innuendo than you, but that one is good.
That is a
is
good
good.
one. That's a good one.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you know, look, I know what you mean, because it does then just become ridiculous. You know, she walks
Yeah.
into a room, it's like, tits, look at me. You know, it's sort of very like, okay, we get it. You're a sexy person, apparently.
Yeah.
But I guess, I don't know, maybe this sort of just the sheer, you know, frequency of it just was kind of unusual to my ears, and it really tickled me. Just this sort of, she's unstoppable.
Yeah. I think one of the issues you have with innuendo now is that innuendo is a style of humor that's based around the idea that something is unsayable. And it's quite hard to think about anything sexual that is unsayable now. I mean, there's a
Really.
whole thing where Timothy Dalton, who is a sixth husband here, keeps he keeps giving these interviews which get mistaken for like detailed explanations of his homosexual past. And nowadays you just watch it and you think, why does no one just say, sorry, are you saying you've had sex with men? At which point you would say, oh no, that's not what I mean. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but what I'm saying is, it's like, why
I know.
just yeah.
And it just keeps on getting worse and worse. I know. And then I think, you know, and then obviously I was like, oh, that's sort of like, you know, because her husband's actually, but in saying that, we had Ringo Starr, who was English as well, but I was like, oh yeah, it's just this sort of old trope that like British men are gay, you know, so a very, very British guy, you know, in this situation, that's his sort of storyline, you know, that he's gay, or that he keeps saying he's gay, and everyone's like, oh, okay, that, you know, yeah, I know what you mean. And I suppose like, yeah, it is very, it's very of its time. I know I said that already, but it's sort of like, yeah, a lot of the innuendo now, I think, would be is crass. It's incredibly crass, you know.
Yeah.
And also sometimes a little creepy. Although, you know, they make a point of changing "Happy Birthday, Sweet 16" to "Happy Birthday, 21," which I thought was nice, you know.
I mean, when you consider the age gap that you're being asked to picture, it's not saying much, is it?
This woman was drawing her pension by the time this child was being born. So, I mean, it's an interesting song, that. But yeah, I know exactly what you mean. And possibly this film is watched better in snippets.
Yeah.
So, you know, you could watch like scenes of it. And I think a lot of people do, because obviously of the very famous musicians and actors that feature in the film with her. So I've seen a lot online. There's lots of little clips of the film to see Tony Curtis or Ringo Starr, or, you know, especially Alice Cooper. Their bits are sort of pinpointed out, and that makes it sort of almost funnier. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about one of those, because I think, as you say, the competition is fierce, but I do think the "Love Will Keep Us Together" thing might be the worst musical number in film history.
That was your one? Okay, that's fine. Okay. Because neither of them are singers, though. Neither of them are singers. Well, I mean,
God, no.
You know, she's not singing in this film.
Yeah, and Timothy Dalton, like, he starts it off by saying the lyrics in his most Shakespearean actor tone. He ends up sounding like those Peter Sellers skits where, you know, it's Laurence Olivier sings "A Hard Day's Night" or something like that. And it's just, I mean, like I say, the song is "Love Will Keep Us Together." It might as well have been "Love Will Tear Us Apart." It would have made no difference.
No, the song makes no difference. Most of the songs make no difference, actually, I would say. I mean, a lot of them are just wedged in, which I sort of, I mean, that is a surefire sign of, you know, camp ridiculousness. Let's just, okay, what do we do? How do we get into it? Just start singing. You know, that's fine. I don't mind that. But there's very slim relevance to what's actually happening. I mean, so Timothy Dalton is playing her new husband, and they are they've just come back to the hotel room, and so we're, you know, it's sort of leading towards the bed, and sort of terror is rising as we're sort of going, is this gonna happen here? Because this is and then, you know, she's sort of undressing a little bit, and he's undressing, he's sort of taking his tie off, and they sing this sort of very worthy "Love Will Keep Us Together" song. There's no relevance to the plot. There's no relevance to anything that they're doing. apart from him just saying "I love you," and she's like "I love you," and then that's like let's sing the song, you know? Yeah.
I think it's like you've got these performers coming at the lyric from completely opposite ends because Dalton, as I've said, is imbuing it with far too much feeling. You know,
Yes.
it's a fun song. Love will keep us together. It's not a deep song, and it's not trying to be, but he's reading it like it's a funeral oration. And then you've got West, who seems to be incapable of giving it anything whatsoever. That she's only given one word for most of it. That word is whatever, and she really is giving
Oh,
whatever.
she's like literally like, but they've told her. I mean, that's sort of. Again, this is where it's odd because I'm guessing that she's just got married to this guy. You know, they're meant to be. I mean, again, trying to imbue her with emotion is really difficult because it's just a mask at this stage. But she's sort of just going whatever to his whole like I love you, and she's like whatever. And that's what the directors told her. That's what they've told her to do. That's what she's doing. That's the decision she's made. So she's not giving
It,
him anything. It's like, go on, girl, you give us nothing. She's not giving.
it is. That's it. It's the go on, girl, give us nothing of film performances completely.
Yeah, yeah,
It comes back with a vengeance in, as you've mentioned, the Alice Cooper number, where again she has one word, next, and
yes,
I think, repeatedly fails to time it at the right point in the song.
yeah. I mean, but again, I think he gives quite a worthy performance, Alice Cooper.
He's given it
He,
some, isn't it? He's an old pro, right, Alice
yeah,
Cooper? You can put him in any situation and he'll give it his best.
even this situation, which is,
Yeah,
for very odd.
he's
Did you know I
playing.
read this that he wrote another song for this
Oh, did he?
film called "No More Tears,"
Right.
and Mae West heard it and said, "I will not be crying over any man." So he said, no problem. And he wrote next, or whatever it's called. He left you, whatever, next. I think it's called. Let's give it a
That's
full title.
good.
And so yeah, he wrote that song, and she liked it. So they used it in the film because she said, no, I wouldn't, I'm not going to cry over him. I'm not going to be seen doing that.
I mean, you would admire that. That is an example of West's like cast iron control over her image that's
Yeah.
very easy to admire. And like you say, Cooper's giving it some. He's in this bizarre situation where he's a singing waiter. He's looking very clean cut, sat at the piano. It's not what you imagine Alice Cooper really wants to be seen at the moment, but he's turned up for it and he's going to give it everything.
I just think I mean, I don't think this of a lot of the people that are in the film. I think they just wanted to work with her.
Yeah, I
I
would
mean, I
say so.
think,
Yeah.
and her star power at that stage. I mean, she was obviously on the way on the wane, like a lot of actresses from the time,
Mm.
especially actresses. Actually, actors sort of seem to be able to keep working. I wonder why that
Yeah.
hierarchy. But actresses, especially at that time, I think, because they were all these kind of golden screen actresses. Even started off before, they were in silent movies and stuff, and then you're getting to the end of the year, the Gloria Swansons and their bloody, and then there's the Betty Davis and Joan Crawfords of it all, and
Mm.
I guess they would have been like royalty, and I guess
Yeah.
some stars were just like, yeah, doesn't matter what I do. Although, I mean, Keith Moon makes a interesting arrival at one point.
The point at which I sympathised the most with Marlowe is when she's in the middle of having her dress fitted by Keith Moon, and she says, "How
Just
long is
pause,
this
pause and
going
think
to
about that
take?"
sentence for a second. Pause and think about that sentence. When she's in the middle of her getting her dress fitting by Keith Moon.
Yeah, yeah, okay.
Who, very tragically, this is his last. I mean, he died the same year of the film. So this is
Yes, I
the
mean
last things he did.
we've done a couple of films either starring or about the Who or people
Yeah.
from the Who. We've done a number of them. We've done Tommy, of course, and
Yeah.
Quadrophenia, and who could forget Roger Daltrey's role in Nico Mastorakis' .com for Murder, a
I mean,
film that exists. Um, but yeah, Moon is never that present in them. He's in Tommy. He died before Quadrophenia came out.
mhm.
He's someone who, for all he was like a part of the powerhouse that was the Who in their golden age, his screen footprint is not as big as his bandmates.
Yeah.
So this is his showcase, I guess.
And he is, I mean, he leaves no bit of scenery unchewed.
Christ, no.
He is ridiculously over the top. He looks much older than his 32 years, but that's...
Yeah, well, you can hazard a guess as to
yeah,
why.
exactly. I'm not surprised by that. But it's a fun little cameo. And he looks like he's having fun.
He certainly is having fun. I will give that to him. He is definitely entertained.
I mean, they're not in the same room. They're briefly, they briefly speak. And then, you can plainly see that she's doing something and he's doing something in different studios across time. But, I think I liked him. I didn't recognize him at first. I liked him. I was like, oh yeah, he's funny, little jumping up and down cameo. I thought he did well.
It did remind me of a line from Alexis Petridis, the Guardian's music critic that I always cherish, which said that a lot of those 60s and 70s rock and roll films were made by bands who saw 8.5 and for some reason thought, oh yeah, we could do that. And I think Keith Moon's performance is that, but for like the British satire boom of the 60s. He's trying to do Peter Cook or Spike Milligan or something that.
Oh, he's doing his best. Yeah, definitely. You can see that. And the film was filmed in America, right? Even though it does feel like a very British film.
Yeah, Hughes was British. I know that much.
Yeah, I'm almost sure it was filmed in the US because I think Moon was living out there at the time. Even though they've got Timothy Dalton and him, but then Dom DeLuise, very American. Tony Curtis would have been an American. So I think they mocked it up to look like an English hotel. And by the way, we don't leave the English hotel. We're in it constantly. There's no other sets. But yeah, I think so. I think they're sort of trying to pastiching England a little bit generally, and then they would have got him in and like, oh, I've seen the Monty Python guy, or not the Monty Python guys, but like the Peter Cook.
It is quite Python-esque as well.
Yeah, really sort of chaotic performance, and he goes for it. Good for him.
Yeah. That Englishness you mention, I did a list of the things that Regis Philbin claims about Marlowe's wedding at the start.
Right.
That it is the biggest event to happen in England since the coronation. The next newsreader claims it is equally important to the top-level world peace talks that are being held in the same hotel.
At the same hotel, yes.
Yeah.
Just very coincidentally.
In full Mitchell and Webb get me Henny Moore style.
Yeah.
They're being held next door to each
other. President Jimmy Carter in attendance, obviously.
Yeah, actually, I'll give the film credit for one thing: a really great Jimmy Carter lookalike.
Are you sure it wasn't him? I thought it was.
Was that why he got voted out of office? Was that why he's one-term president because of Sextette?
Stranger thing. This is my 2024 politically addled mind, assuming that the president had been in a film. I honestly thought it was him.
No, I checked the IMDb page, and there's this guy who has like about 6 credits. And 5 of them Jimmy Carter lookalikes. It's like, one.
Yeah, that's good.
One must have been hoping that he would win re-election more than that one guy, because otherwise that's your livelihood gone there.
Dried up. Yeah. I thought it was him. Sorry, that's my okay. Never mind. This is. But yeah, I mean, what else did they say about about England, or was that it? Was it just the biggest coronation?
I think there's that, and then the other sort of bit of British scene setting I guess is over the opening credits, which are very Route Master Bus intensive. I thought
it's Austin Powers.
Yeah,
it's Austin Powers. That's really. I was like, I could be this. I mean, I don't know. I'm sure he watched it. and actually probably stole a bit more from it than we think.
I think so, because whenever Mike Myers talks about the inspirations for Austin Powers, it's always quite esoteric stuff, isn't it? It's not
Mhm.
like it's never a Hard Day's Night. It's never any of the expected swinging London stuff. It's quite weird, specific kind of 60s British things.
It is, and I think that it would be too much of a coincidence. I mean, we have a huge opening set piece. You
Mm,
know, well, you didn't even see her for ages, and they're doing
yeah,
things. Oh, run around, you know, and it's very big, and you know, and then whenever she does emerge, there's dancing and there's all this, and it's very similar to his big set pieces. And I mean, you know, it is a bit of a no. Well, I'm trying. You know, I'm not boned up on my '60s cinema necessarily, but I mean, you know, it's very similar, and I'm
it is.
struggling to think of another film that does that in the same way.
Mm,
You know, and it's fine for him to say he based Austin on sort of Michael
Simon D.
or
and
Simon T. and then or like
yeah,
Italian Job, Michael Caine or
yeah.
whatever. I mean, it's fine to say that, but there's a lot of Marlowe Manners. Is that it? Is it Marlowe Manners?
Oh, which is it? Is it Manners or Manning? I can't remember. Let me
Okay,
see.
I'm sure they
Uh,
know.
yeah, that's probably why I'm confused. Marlow Manners, yes.
Manners. There's a lot of Marlowe Manners in Austin Powers, I think.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so
I
maybe we
think,
covered his source material that he doesn't want us to know.
well, one of the things with Austin Powers is that for all he has a reputation as having a bit of an ego on him on set, Mike Myers is very alert to the gag potential of making the world's biggest sex symbol be him in like a
Yeah.
bad wig and someone flattering clothes. He knows that's funny.
Yes.
Mae West, less so.
Yeah. I mean, I'd love to. She at the end of her life. I mean, I've seen interviews and things. She is a bit of an enigma, and I think it could just be, you know, she's well, no, because she's with it. You know, it's not like she's sort of losing it or she's of an advanced age, but she's sort
Yeah.
of with it. And you know, so I'd love to have more of an insight into what she thought, not in a horrible way, but what she thought she was doing in that, or was that a director's decision?
Mm,
Like, look, you know, because there could have been a couple of lines where she just was like, "You're the youngest guy, the youngest one I've ever married." She could have made a joke out of it. Do you know what I mean?
yeah, yeah.
But yeah, no, she doesn't. And I don't think there could have been a world in which anybody involved thought that she was going to get away with it, right?
You would think, but it's very strange. I've read some like interviews from around the time, and
Yeah,
everyone mostly just says how wonderful it is to work with Mae West. Now,
yeah,
granted, that's PR speak, but
yeah.
maybe it is reflective of the mood on set. Maybe everyone just was there thinking, I can't believe I'm working with this Hollywood legend.
I think that's probably true.
Mm,
I think that is, and that's what probably the momentum of the film rests on a bit. Um,
yeah,
Certainly, yeah. I mean, I think some actors sort of, I mean, they're all hamming it up. They're all,
yeah,
they all know they're in a silly sex romp. I think,
yes.
but yeah, I guess, yeah. And I mean, you can't underestimate the pull of someone like Mae West as far as sort of, you know, Hollywood appeal goes. And maybe
No,
they just,
absolutely.
this is going to be a laugh and let's do it. And if it's successful, it's successful. Unfortunately, it was not successful.
It was not successful. No.
Audiences did not warm to the year-old. Yeah, which is a shame, but oh well.
No. We've talked about him a bit, but I think we need to talk a bit about Timothy Dalton's actual performance in this because it's very straight, very understated. I think it's the closest to having something that cuts through the kind of vaudeville frenzy of it all. Because you're obviously not going to get that from Tony Curtis playing a Russian diplomat. You're not going
No,
to get that from Keith Moon pretending to be a high society fashion designer.
yeah,
The
yeah,
guy who is trying to bring some sort of core to the movie is Dalton.
Yeah, and I would say to an extent Dom DeLuise as well.
Fair, yes. Yeah, I mean, that's more of a comedy role, but he's not
It is.
like
Yeah.
going into orbit with it.
Exactly. And I think, yeah, no, I agree with you. And I think Timothy Dalton is definitely playing into, like, the more I think about it, the more I think it's certainly how Americans see English people.
Yeah.
And then they're playing up to that. Keith Moon, we already talked about that, the example of that. But also Timothy Dalton's doing that just in a different way as a very sort of straight-laced English person, who upper class English person who is, you know, sort of just wants time alone with her. And I would imagine that when he sort of looked into the background of his character, which I'm sure he did, he's a thespian. Sort of his whole thing just was like, why can't I get to spend time with her? You know, why can't I basically sleep with her? Because she's just being pulled in all these directions. She's so famous, and I'm just here, the seventh Duke of, what was he, the Duke of Buckingham or something? I mean, yeah.
Oh gosh, yeah. What was he?
Lady, became Lady, whatever
Lord
it was.
Lord Barrington.
Barrington, that's it. So, you know, something in line to the throne. He's thinking, you know, he's like, I will be the backbone of this film. I'll be the sensibility. Which is ironic because then at the end he leaves.
Yes.
He abandons her, doesn't he? And judging by Alice Cooper's original song, she was meant to be quite upset about that. But obviously she just goes, I don't care. You can't see anything on the face. But yeah, in the end he ends up leaving her because she has no time for him, you know. And so yeah, it's an interesting character arc for him, I think.
He leaves, but he does manage to recover the film's MacGuffin, which is a cassette of Marlowe's purportedly scandalous memoirs. And in a genuinely extraordinary moment, once Dom DeLuise realizes what's happened, he claims this is bigger than 007.
Yes. It'll blow everything up. Yeah. And also, did we ever find out why she recorded it? Is she gonna write a book, or is it as blackmail, or is it just that she's done it and because maybe she's
my impression is that she is planning on writing a book, but Dom DeLuise's character is also adamant that it must never get out, and it's like, well,
which is like,
it's like maybe you could publish it as a book called 10 Years to Save the West by Liz Truss, thereby ensuring that no one will ever read it. Maybe that's the plan.
It would be based in more reality than that book. And I'd actually want to read it. Yeah, no, it would be explosive. I mean, according to the movie. So it is quite surprising that he doesn't want to approach it. But is that because he's being whispered into his ear by the Secret Service and whoever else going, she can't possibly do it?
Quite possibly, yeah.
Isn't he? So yeah, and I love, my favorite bit of that is whenever she finds, I mean, it works its way around the hotel as much as she does, this tape. And obviously, my favorite bit is whenever it's on the trampoline, found its way miraculously to a trampoline, being jumped upon by someone in the, you know, World American Sports Team, as it's called. And basically then, does a big jump on it, and it goes flying up into Gargoyle's mouth. And then she says, everything goes up for Marlowe, which is like a prime example of the innuendo.
Yeah, I'm not normally bothered by bad physics in movies and TV. As I've said before, I'm a Doctor Who fan. No scientific.
Can't be in that world yet. That's fine.
But yeah, the scene where the tape is stuck on a trampoline until someone bounces so hard that it flies up far higher than the actual person on the trampoline and flies through the roof and into a gargoyle's mouth is extraordinary. What is that?
Just suspension of belief was fine for me, you know. I was fine with that. Yeah, it is, I mean, I think it is like the literal definition of a MacGuffin. That tape.
Oh yeah,
Its sole purpose is to get her to leave the room,
yeah,
walk around slowly. In apparently, what are again another thing that this film is a rabbit hole. Like I said, she had a very distinctive walk,
yeah.
and there you see it. It's on show quite a lot. Although the rumors that she was sometimes wheeled around are prevail. She was sometimes wheeled around because she just couldn't be arsed to walk. And then it literally apparently it's because of her body shape, and she was very short and she was quite stout.
Mm.
So and there's a picture online if anybody really wants to go and look for it. She had shoes made which were basically like double shoes. So if you can
Oh
imagine a
yes,
shoe on top of a shoe, that she
yes.
put into that shoe, and then it was almost like there was another shoe underneath it, like so a double-sized shoe, not a platform, two shoes, and then she had her dresses made extra long in order so the bottom of the shoe was just poking out. So it looked like she was walking, but I mean, obviously that did slightly make her walk a little bit strangely because
She's
she was,
trying not to fall off her
yeah,
enormous shoes. Yeah,
and then she believed, and that in terms of her body shape and everything, it gave her more length and elegance, and so that's I think why there's a number of scenes where she's sort of walking, and you can see it's a very sort of and it's not that she's about to fall down. I think it's that she's wearing these ridiculous shoes.
yes,
Yeah,
yeah. I would agree. I think that is quite possible. It's funny how Salvador Dali famously made a sofa in the 1930s that was based on the shape of Mae West's lips,
oh, there you
but
go.
the double shoes are the most surreal
They're very
artifact
surreal.
associated with her.
Yeah, looking at them. So I saw a picture of them online, and they're. It's like as if like the bottom shoe's filled with like concrete or something and it's like really odd. It's a very and that nobody said to her like throughout her life, you don't like to wear platforms. I guess she just got used to it, and then she had confidence. I mean, I think doing things like that was not unusual at the time. Actresses were commonly, especially black and white actresses, commonly employing lots of tricks to try and make themselves look taller, thinner,
Oh yeah,
better. They all over. I mean, Betty Davis and her overdrawn lips, right up until she got older. She's still drawn on those lips, massive lips, and and there was
yeah.
all sorts of tricks and hints and things used by drag queens today. I would imagine a lot of them as well to like kind of bring out the femininity, but they had to do that because of the quality of the film or the fact that it was black and white or whatever. And I think that sort of hung around with her.
Mm.
Shoes. I mean, suppose when she had them made, make do and men, she was not going to trade them in for some fast fashion.
Uh, we've mentioned drag a lot without mentioning that apparently pre-fame, Mae West worked as what Wikipedia describes as a male impersonator.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. I
Which I
know.
think is very cool. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very cool. I mean, I think she is a bit of an icon in the drag world. I have friends who are drag queens. I watch a lot of Drag Race. Not necessarily qualified as a drag queen myself, as well, thanks to the beard. Although beards are in now with drag, but yeah, I think she is a bit of an inspiration for a lot of drag queens. I know she was portrayed famously by a drag queen called Alaska on RuPaul's Drag Race, which was a great impersonation and really funny.
Mm.
It sort of took her comments and made them even more risque, if you can believe it. Incorporated a lot of swearing, something like that. But it's really, she does a great impression of her. So I mean, she is sort of, as an actress, she definitely is known in the drag community, and I think is portrayed and honored in that way. I think she also had friends. I think she was an early drag sort of, I mean, working as a drag artist herself, but also she did have friends who were drag queens and was quite a proponent of gay and lesbian rights at the time. Very very
Yes.
early days of that. So good for her. She was in Hollywood, for God's sake. I'm sure she'd seen it all. And she was quite into sort of progressive ideas like that. So good for her.
Yes, there was a specific play. Oh, she wrote a play that was actually called The Drag, which, yeah, it was not about drag strip racing. But yeah, that was never opened on Broadway because of censorship concerns. As you said
Yeah,
earlier on, sex landed her in jail.
yeah.
She once said that I do believe in censorship. I made a fortune out of it,
There you go.
and that was very much the charm of her early days. That she was someone who was going to push as hard against the Hays Code as you possibly could.
Yeah, and good for her. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of what could she have achieved, or maybe it was this sort of prohibition of sex that really motivated her, and maybe if she was
Mm.
around today and working today, you wouldn't have seen as much because was more difficult to push against. But she definitely seems like the motivation and the sort of just path that her life followed. She wasn't afraid of writing, producing, starring, even in Sextette.
Yeah.
And that's got to be admired. She was a bit of a trendsetter. I mean, there wasn't a lot of women who were writing and producing, and especially leaving film to go into theater and back again and backwards and forwards. And I know that a lot of people did plays and stuff, but I mean, you're sort of talking about Hollywood as the goal, and she was on
Mm.
the stage, and good for her. The more I hear about her, the more I like her.
Do you think that's a good place to leave off? I think that's a good, positive place to leave off. I think whatever one can say about this film, Mae West, we are pro.
We are definitely pro Mae West.
Yeah.
He's a trendsetter.
So, if you subscribe to The Geek Show's Patreon at www.patreon.com/The Geek Show, you can hear some of our Patreon exclusive episodes of this show. There's a new one every month. There is one that we did together about Britney Spears' film Crossroads.
Yep.
As and a thousand other things we do, reviews of Red Dwarf, The X-Files, 2 podcasts which aren't available anywhere else, tons of stuff if you subscribe, and it's only at most £3 a month. But David, do you want to remind people where they can find you online?
Yeah, sure. On David Patrick 81 on most platforms. I'm writing for the Geek Show, and yeah, that's it.
Yep, I'm also writing for The Geek Show. You can find me on Letterboxd just by searching for Graham Williamson, and I'm on Instagram at Graham W Film. But until next time, I've been Graham.
I've been David.
And we'll see you in a fortnight's time with more Pop Screen.